Hello and welcome to this online classroom, the online classroom of the month of February. And we will be talking about newsletters and specifically how to create engaging newsletters in Foleon, but so much more about newsletters. Maybe you ask yourself, what will I get out of this session? Why should I spend an hour on my valuable Tuesday together with us? And that is so that you can learn how to create newsletters that give your subscribers a new reading experience, no matter how you create your newsletters at the moment, or if at all. We will be talking about editorial best practices, how to create engaging newsletters or how to make them more engaging. And we will be sharing best practices for making them in Foleon. My name is Lobke Bijman. I'm the Customer Education Manager at Foleon, and you may have seen me during previous online classrooms or webinars, but I am not by myself today. So first of all, let me introduce to you Dennis Looijenga. Welcome, Dennis. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. So my name is Dennis. I do customer marketing here at Foleon. I've been with the company for quite a while, and I've mostly worked in B2B marketing. And my aim is really to help and inspire customers to get the most out of Foleon. You may also recognize me from plenty of emails or messages that you get inside the product, telling you all about all our latest updates or our latest case study and stuff like that. And I'm really happy to be here today and speak to you all.
That's great. Yeah, we have the expert internally of working with Foleon and creating newsletters. Dennis is involved with different newsletters that Foleon sends out, and we'll be sharing more about that in a moment. We also have someone kind of like in the back end, Afsha Sharif. She's a customer success coach for Foleon. So she may be yours, she may be new to you, but she is active right now in the chat. So you will see her as part of this online classroom today. A quick bit of practical information. We'll take about 50 to maximum 60 minutes. So in an hour or in 58 minutes, we will be signing off and you can get on with your day. For the time being, get your pen and paper, have a glass of water or a coffee, whatever time it is where you're at, and take notes, because you may take out just one little thing you want to do different in your next newsletter, or you may come up with an entire newsletter strategy. So pay attention. You can watch this on demand, and we will have plenty of ways to interact with us live during this online classroom. I've just visualized them for you here because we've added a third option to not confuse you at all. So first of all, if you have any questions, either for me or of course, specifically Dennis, ask them through one of these two question options. The one is all the way on the top. It's go on camera. That's the new one. And we can invite you live in this webinar to talk right here with Dennis and me alongside of us and ask your questions. We can have a little bit of a back and forth about your use case. That is new, so we will try it. If you dare, we love that. So please, we will start with your question. And then if you're like, I just have a quick question, let me type it and get on with it. Ask a question to the speakers. That way we can visualize it on screen. And if you just have a comment or just want to say, hey, hello, I'm here, please use the chat. And Afsha is managing that throughout this online webinar. I hope this is clear. We just go ahead, try it, and make a kind of like a feast out of this online classroom. And of course, the goal is that you really get some interesting takeaways on how to make the most out of your newsletter and get the best engagement and of course traction. First, a poll. We will be asking you some questions as well. And this is the first one. We're just curious, and specifically Dennis as well, to maybe move his story a little bit in a different direction, is to know how much experience do you already have with newsletters? Let us know by answering the poll. You can say none, I'm brand new. Maybe you're thinking about starting newsletters. Have you gotten started but less than a year ago, or have you been creating them for a while? Let us know by clicking your answer to the poll, and we'll be discussing the results in a moment. Any response from you, Dennis?
Yeah, no, obviously, like curious to see the results because indeed, like if you already have plenty of experience with newsletters, hopefully I can still add something to that. But if you're just getting started, I also hope to have enough information ready to help you get on your way.
Awesome. I think in terms of the content of this webinar, of course, first of all, everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to be here live. And thank you for answering the poll. I'll get back to you about that shortly. But for now, let's just get started. Dennis, I would say the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so today we'll be talking about newsletters. I already saw a quick note in the chat about if it's just newsletters in general or specifically newsletters with Foleon. We'll be covering both, but we'll be diving a little bit deeper into newsletters specifically with Foleon, of course. But as said, we will be covering both, or basically the whole aspect of it. So to get into it, I just want to start with some background, basically. So why are newsletters such a powerful tool? I'm not sure if you saw this recently, but Oatly, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the brand. I'm assuming plenty of you are. Recently launched a new newsletter, and they went pretty big on promotion. So they bought not one, but two giant billboards somewhere in the US to promote their newsletter. And I saw this on LinkedIn, and I also saw a comment from Angela, who was the one posting this saying like newsletters are typically a little unsexy, overlooked workhorses, but that can definitely be secret weapons. And it's our job as marketeers or people in communication or whatnot to really make sure that the newsletters are a worthwhile read. So today I'll be sharing a little bit about how you can do that. And also, funnily enough, they chose to call their newsletter spam, which is of course funny.
Yeah, I had such a laugh about that spam newsletter. Also, if you click on their spam URL, it's uniquely well done.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, I definitely agree. So newsletters are just a great way to frequently engage your audience, but also keep your brand top of mind. And speaking about audiences, like there are typically free, like for us in B2B, there are typically free audiences. There will be prospective customers, actual current customers, but also your internal team. And of course, like if you're not in B2B or in a different space, there are also other audiences that you could consider, such as maybe investors or partners or members or whatever. But for our case, we chose these three. And when you're serving your audience or when you're creating a newsletter or improving an existing one, it's really essential that you try to understand what your audience wants and prefers. So your number one question should be, what would my audience be interested in reading? And specifically, what would they be interested in hearing from me as a vendor or a company? And also, how frequently would they want to hear from me? So would that be weekly, monthly, or quarterly, and whatnot? And then finally, what format would they appreciate the most? So I also already mentioned a bit earlier that we'll be talking about email newsletters, but also newsletters with Foleon. There are plenty of different types or they come in all shapes and sizes, basically. So we'll be covering that as well. But these are the top three questions that you should be asking yourself when you're thinking about your newsletter.
Maybe one question about you,
Yes.
Dennis. Which of these three audiences have you been involved in creating newsletters for?
Yeah, so me as I do customer marketing here, I've been very heavily involved with everything we send to our customers. So that's definitely my preferred space. For prospects, I haven't been as involved. Neither have I been for our team internally, but definitely customers specifically for me.
Cool. Good to know.
Yep. Thank you. So some topics that might be interesting for the different audiences that we have here. So for prospects, obviously there's a different goal in mind there with your newsletter versus existing customers. But things that you could consider sharing would be just your latest helpful content. So blog posts, guides, videos, and whatnot. But also noteworthy company news. So did you recently get new funding? Are you doing a rebranding? Are you organizing any events that would be interesting for a specific group of your prospects? but also obviously information about your product or your service. So are you adding new products? Are you updating existing ones? Are you changing prices? All of that. For customers, you can see that the content will shift slightly. So you'll mostly be trying to share tips and tricks for using your product or your service. So that would be help articles, guides, video lessons, and all of that. But also inspiration, and again, product service or product or service info. And then internally, pretty wildly different because it's a whole different audience. But things you could consider is like a pulse check. So where are we at with what that important project that we're running or that we're working on? Or how are other initiatives progressing along with other company news such as events or updates to policies and whatnot. But also, this is a good opportunity for you to introduce new team members, but also share vacancies that you're still looking to hire for. So these are things that you could consider in terms of content for your newsletter.
That's great. And I'm just thinking, what if, for example, someone has partners as their audience or another audience group? Could we say that maybe they can think of some recurring topics for their audience specifically? Because that's the idea, right?
Yeah, you definitely want to ensure that you have like a like a fixed number of topics that you cover in your newsletter that are relevant for that specific audience. So for investors, obviously, like it would be very important to communicate about how your company is doing, what is growth looking like, how is the market changing, stuff like that. Whereas for partners, that would be very different again. But indeed, always try to stick to a few topics and really do them well, instead of trying to basically cover so many topics that it's difficult to really find something that's worth sharing.
Cool.
And then also setting the frequency. So how often do you want to send your newsletter? I think it's important here that you find a way to strike a balance between your own need to communicate versus what your audience actually prefers. So you may have so much to share that you think, I'll do it weekly, but is it also something that your audience is waiting for? Are they waiting to hear from you every week? Those are things that you need to keep in mind. So there are like a number of frequencies that you could uphold. So it could be weekly or daily. Like if you do this is definitely not for everybody. So here I would definitely recommend ensuring that you set everything up for maximum efficiency, or even automate where you can, because this is a lot of work to do. And then you have monthly, which I think is the most common frequency. This gives you enough time to create something worth reading, while also ensuring that you're not over communicating with your audience. But you could also even do quarterly, so every 3 months. This gives you plenty of time to create something special and maybe go a little above and beyond the typical newsletter. So these are like some frequencies that you can keep in mind, depending on what works for you and for your audience. And then the format. So this is the comment in the chat that I referred to earlier. So I think the most common format for newsletters is definitely email. But of course, us being Foleon, you can also definitely create them with our platform. So I'll just cover like how I think they're different right now. Oh, we have a poll first. Sorry about that. Do you want to take this one, Lobke?
I definitely think that email and newsletters and Foleon, there is a combination. So more about that in a moment. In terms of the poll results of the previous poll, before we dive more into the formats, as you can see, 45% of the people that are live with us right now, they have been creating them for a while. And then the other three options of people that are brand new, that are thinking about it, or they have started less than a year ago, are almost equally divided. And it is time for a new poll, because I think, Dennis, you are very curious to know what kind of newsletter format people are making. Are they currently only setting them up in their, are you setting it up in your email, for example, from your marketing automation platform? Are you creating your newsletter in Foleon? Are you not creating newsletters at the moment, or something else? Then let us know in the chat. That would be interesting as well for us to kind of get an idea about. Dennis, is Foleon creating all their newsletters in Foleon, or?
Not per se. I think there's definitely a time and place for email versus Foleon. It really depends on how much content you want to share. I think if you have a very specific topic in mind, like just one singular topic, for instance, we have our new in Foleon email newsletter, which is just about the latest updates and features that we added to the system. I think because that's a very singular topic, I think email works very nicely. But if you have something that's a bit more broader, maybe that covers several topics, I think then Foleon definitely comes into play, and that's definitely where you can consider moving to Foleon instead of using email. But definitely both have a strong place in the scope of things.
That's great. Yeah, I'm just quickly kind of like also browsing the chat. I see a lot of responses are coming in, people that are combining it. Someone just got an email template set up, PDF, multiple ways, by internal, by email. So thank you all for your responses. Very interesting. And just based on the votes from the poll, the majority, so 56%, are using emails to like have their newsletter set up in email.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think, and rightfully so, I think email is a very powerful tool for newsletters. Well, of course, also today we will also show you why you can consider using Foleon as well, in addition to email.
Cool. I'll let the poll open a little bit longer, but I am curious, maybe if you can elaborate a little bit what the difference of a newsletter in Foleon or a newsletter in your marketing automation platform, and thus an email, will be, and maybe like how would you know what's the best method for you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'll just continue from that on. So for email newsletters, I think like it's definitely the most common format, as we also saw in our poll, which doesn't surprise me. And as said, I think it's best fit for if you have like a singular topic or multiple topics that are very closely related, because they're usually built to be very transactional. So you really, like for email newsletters, you just want people to click through and read more about a specific topic. And that's why also they function a little bit like a spider web, because the subscriber, they get the newsletter and they just choose where they want to go. So they click on a link, they go to your site, and then maybe they come back to the newsletter, or maybe they don't. It's really up to them how they engage with your newsletter. So it's definitely a very different experience, I think, from Foleon. Because Foleon newsletters are, as said, like perfect for multiple topics, as you can spread those over multiple pages, or you can even use overlays to ensure that you're sort of like not overloading content, basically. And you're also better able to provide a more consistent reading experience, something with a beginning and an end. So something where you can really take your subscribers through your newsletters instead of them choosing where they go. And also, Foleon offers plenty of functionality that are not always possible with email. So videos, data visualizations, forms, like all kinds of things that you can add to make it more interactive. And we'll talk more about that later. But to summarize, like this is basically how I visualize it personally. So if you have an email newsletter, you basically have plenty of links all going to your website or maybe somewhere else. And people can choose to go there and then go back to the newsletter, and they'll just be clicking in whatever they find most interesting. And with Foleon, if you create the newsletter with Foleon, you would send an email, which is one link to the Foleon doc. And you can also link to that from social, of course, and other channels. But then in that Foleon doc, it's more of a layered experience. So you have like the cover page, your index page, and then you have all of your articles, everything that you want to share in the newsletter. And it's really more like a story, something that people would go through from the beginning to the end, instead of for the email where they can just go wherever they please, basically. It's definitely a different experience. And it also relates heavily to what your audience prefers in terms of format, but also how much content you have to share and how relevant, how related those individual topics are. So I think now is time for us to share a quick video, but I'll leave that with you, Lobke.
Yeah, I'll start that in a moment. So maybe just to recap, they are both powerful, both creating your newsletter fully in email or in Foleon. And also based on the responses in the chat, I see a lot of people that say both because they promote their Foleon newsletter through email. Maybe just one quick question that I picked up that we can answer right now. It's Sophia. She said, we create an image to link to our Foleons from email. It would be so cool to be able to embed the advert for the newsletter as HTML in the email somehow and track who went to it and from where. Do you think that might be a future development for Foleon?
It's definitely an interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer it fully, to be honest. I think because the possibilities you have with email can be pretty limited depending on the software you use. I know that there are plenty of things in the works that will make emails a little bit more interactive, like with the ability to actually play videos within an email or embed things like a Foleon doc, for instance. I don't think that's on our calendar soon, to be quite frank. But I do think it's interesting. So yeah, it's definitely just also for us to see how things develop in the email space and what kind of additional tools will become available for us to make use of those as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are you okay to answer another question, or would you like to move on to the video?
No, I'm fine. I can answer questions.
Eleanor asked a question: as the Foleon newsletter needs to be sent by email initially, how do you ensure that they engage in the first place?
No, that obviously all relates to how you set up the email. So I have some tips on that later, but I can share a few things now.
If it's later, maybe we just move on.
Yeah, I'll cover that later. I think that's
all right. Eleanor, stay tuned. Let's do one more question and then move on. If I miss any questions, Afsha is in the chat, so she'll make sure that she either forwards them to us or responds to them herself. So sorry if I missed your question. Salma is the next question and the last one for now. Can I integrate a newsletter created on Foleon to MailChimp?
Yeah, I think that's a similar question to the one from Sophia. So I think my answer is also similar. Not right now, but it really depends on how things develop in the email space and what kind of new tools become available to us to ensure that you can provide better sneak peeks or maybe even a fully embedded Foleon doc within the email.
Yeah, and you can always link to it.
Yes, of course. Yeah, you can insert GIF images or something like that already provides a little bit of a sneak peek of the Foleon doc itself.
Yeah. That's great. I think for now we will move on to some more content, but just for you to know, if you have any content, webinar or online classroom content related questions, you can also pop them in the question bar on the top right of your screen. That way we can make it visible on the screen. And even if you want to have a little bit of a discussion, it would be really cool if you ask your question on camera. So those options are available. If you do click the go on camera, ask your question on camera, something like that, you will wait until we invite you in, and then you see the page refresh. You can ask your question right here next to me and Dennis, and then you will be kind of excluded from the conversation again once your question is done. But for now, we are going to move on with a recorded lesson. So this is all about how to make your next newsletter more engaging and interactive. So I'm going to play it. It's about 5 minutes, and then we'll be back live with you on this webinar. Enjoy.
In this lesson, you'll learn about multiple ways to make your newsletters more engaging and ultimately enjoying a boost in reader engagement. We will dive into some more advanced ways to do so. Let's take this tip from our designers in mind. We don't try to make it perfect right away, since that would be incredibly time-consuming. Instead, we launch a first version and watch how it performs. So, if you're looking to create your first newsletter in Foleon, go ahead and get started with it. The tips learned in this lesson will help you push that first newsletter to the next level. However, let me share 3 tips that always stay relevant whether you're just getting started or have been creating newsletters for a long time. Then we'll jump to the juicy part of this lesson, showing you some powerful embed options and adding a chat widget. All with the goal in mind to make your next newsletter the most engaging and interactive one yet. When starting out, set up a project folder for the sole purpose of creating newsletters. Don't place other Foleon docs in this project folder. Use a recurring format with a structure your readers will recognize. Saving your first successful newsletter as a doc template will make this easy for you. And lastly, toggle on the editions visibility in the Foleon doc settings. This makes it possible for readers to move to earlier editions of your newsletter. The docs visible there are published docs within the same project folder, That's why you don't want to have other content in that project folder. Now it's time to dive into ways to make your next newsletter the most engaging and interactive yet. Keep your newsletter in mind while watching, and make a note of which options you can leverage in your next edition. If you can embed it, you can include it in your newsletter. With embedding, the possibilities are endless. It's almost like a window looking at another location on the web. Through the embed element, Foleon facilitates your creativity. However, the source determines if you can embed it and what it will look like. Many popular external sources allow you to share or embed. I'll share 3 examples that can be great to include as part of your recurring newsletter format, so that your readers know what to expect and can look out for in each edition. These 3 are all multi-channel marketing examples delivering additional value to your readers. Podcasting is a hot trend. Almost all of us are doing it. Are you sharing this often enough with your audience, though? Embed a podcast episode in every newsletter so that your readers don't miss out on any wisdom you share with the world. The same goes for social media posts. Some of your newsletter readers simply won't be aware that you're active on a specific channel. Seeing what cool stuff you do elsewhere can be informative and inspiring, and it may even get you additional engagement and followers as well. Are you also active on YouTube? Embed your latest video here as well. Whether it's the video of your podcast, latest webinar, promo video, or something else, give some extra visibility to it. Are you still taking notes about what you're going to add to your next newsletter? Other embeds we see our customers use are quizzes and surveys. These embeds give an extra layer of interactivity. Here's an example from Typeform. The styling of this quiz takes place in Typeform itself. To get the URL to embed, often you'll have to extract the source URL from a longer embed code. Always check our Help Center for specific guidance. If you have something else in mind to embed, give it a try. Always double check how it looks on your tablet and mobile viewports. Responsiveness depends mostly on the source where you're embedding from. More tools you can use creatively are a Foleon form, or a form from your marketing automation platform through a native integration. This can be a great way to get your audience to sign up to an event or download a white paper directly from your newsletter. The longer you can keep the attention of your audience, the better. This way, you can better track engagement of what your audience is doing. A final tip to share with you is to include a chat widget to your newsletter. This is also an external tool that you can add through the Google Tag Manager. This feature is not available to all plans. And that's it. Time to help your audience read all of your newsletter content by making it fun and engaging. Here's a quick recap of all the options we shared. We hope you have fun creating your next newsletter. Good luck and thanks for watching.
That was it. I'm very curious, what would be your next embed, or what would you do different in your next newsletter? Not sure if we have time to go over everyone's response right now, but yeah, if you see a lesson like this, it can be very valuable to ask yourself, what would be my takeaway there? What will I do different in the next lesson? Dennis,
Yep.
I think it is time for questions. So are you ready to answer some of the questions that have come in?
Yeah, I did already answer some of them in the chat myself. So if there are any left, we can definitely take those now.
That's great. Yeah, I saw you answer, I think, Abigail, her question about polls. Abigail, I hope the Typeform example in the video was useful for you. And if it answered your question, or if it may just confuse you, let us know so we can help you out. There was a question by Paula as well. Not sure if you've answered that one, but her question is, if the stories that we link in a newsletter are on Foleon, but we try to get more website traffic through our newsletter, is it still possible to have links to our website instead of Foleon subpages?
Yeah, I answered that, but I can just reiterate right now. So what I said, that, like, definitely you can still, from the Foleon doc, you can still link to your website or any place else. And I think also what would what would be interesting to see, specifically for your website, you would probably want to see how many visitors on your website came through your Foleon Doc newsletter. So for that, you could use UTM codes, which maybe is not something that's everybody's aware of, but it does help you better understand where traffic is coming from. So for instance, in Foleon, you can fill in one default UTM code to be added to every external link. And then just every link going out of your Foleon doc will be tracked, basically. And then in Google Analytics, you can see for your website specifically how many visitors came through your Foleon doc.
That's great.
Yep.
Another question came in. It is not necessarily just related to newsletters, but let's have a go at it anyways. It's Daniel, his question. It's on screen right now. I asked about creating charts and infographics within Foleon on the last webinar. I was wondering if there was any development on this.
Yeah, I wasn't in the last webinar myself, so I'm not sure when this was, but we definitely have been making some headway here. So we recently introduced, well, not very recently, but I think half a year ago or something, we introduced new data visualization elements, which allow you to sort of like add counters or like pie charts and even tables also recently to your Foleon doc. So we definitely made headway there in terms of being able to embed or add more charts and stuff like that. But also there we have, you can definitely use other systems as well. So one thing that we have a Help Center article on is Infogram, which is another system that you can use to build data visualization or charts or infographics and whatnot, and then embed them into Foleon. So that's also something definitely that you could consider. But as said, we have been adding functionality here to give you more options.
Yeah, if there is anything specific, Daniel, of course, please let us know. And otherwise, I'll look back and see what our response last time was and what the development has been since. We do have different online classrooms and webinars about every month now. So you may have been on the last one. My apologies if I don't remember. At least let's move on and see if there is anything else. I don't think so. I do think that we have so many more people online that we're getting questions in. So if you're hesitant to ask your question, or if you're like, I don't really have a question, I just have this thing that I struggle with and can use some input, please just drop it in the chat, drop it in the question box. We'd be very happy to, like right now, live, go into your case and see if we can help you out a little bit more. For right now, though, we do have more content coming, so keep taking notes, keep throwing us your questions, and we'll be sending more value your way. You ready to move on, Dennis?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, there we go.
Yeah. So we just had a lesson, and we covered the questions. So now I'll be giving some detailed best practices for Foleon specifically. And we'll be covering 3 topics. So we'll be talking about how you can make your Foleon doc newsletter more engaging, how you can make it easier to scale, so basically create more newsletters quickly, and also how you can better understand your performance and see how you can optimize your newsletter moving forward. So some tips for increasing engagement. I think one thing is really key for newsletters, because it is something that you send very frequently, typically monthly. So it's really important that it's easily recognizable for people. So with that, what you can do is give the newsletter a name and always mention that prominently in your email or even in your subject line, preferably in your subject line. Always use the same sender. So always send it from the same name, and also make the style consistent. So ensure that it looks similar every time so that people can easily recognize it, and always send it at the same time. So for us, for instance, I mentioned our new in Foleon email newsletter. We always try to send that on a specific day of the month and at a specific time as well, just to ensure that people sort of get into a rhythm where they expect to get it around a certain time, and also makes it easier for them to recognize it. We also recently introduced quite a few awesome new features and tools for navigation. Such as the progress bar, which is basically a bar at the top of your navigation that shows readers what percentage of the Foleon doc they've read so far. So that gives them a bit of an understanding of, I've now had about 40% of the doc, and I'm So there's still 60% left for me to read. We also have feed forward, a bunch of new updates, basically. I have a link here in the slide that you can use when you get these slides later that covers all of them. But definitely make use of those because they're very cool.
The progress bar is definitely one of my favorites. It makes reading a document also a lot more pleasant because you can like get a sense of how much more is there, how much more to come.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and also we have plenty of we call them content elements, but plenty of tools available to sort of like increase interactivity. So we have hotspots. You can use forms. You can use overlays. As mentioned just earlier, data visualization. So there's plenty of tools available to you to make your content a little more interactive than the possibilities you would have with email, for instance. And then in terms of scale, so obviously, as I said, because you create newsletters very frequently, possibly every month, it's really key that you set it up you set up an efficient process. So one thing that you could consider doing is workspaces. So that's a feature that we offer. As my dog is drinking water, I hope you don't hear that. We use workspaces. Basically, it allows you to let other teams create their own content in Foleon. So it allows you to set up a separate environment for each team where they can manage their own content and also create their own content. So ideally, you would, as a marketing department, you could empower your internal team to create their own newsletter. And you could empower sales to create their own newsletter, stuff like that. That's definitely something that workspaces can help you unlock. Additionally, I think later today, we're releasing a new feature, which is called the Brand Kit, which is a very powerful feature. So basically what it is that it allows you to set up your branding centrally. So you set it up in one place, and then each Foleon doc that's created afterward will automatically apply that brand kit and be on brand, which is very powerful. So it really helps creators ensure that whatever they create is automatically on brand, helping them get off to a flying start. And it also gives your brand manager or whoever is responsible for your brand and your style, like peace of mind. Doc templates and templates in general, I think that's very powerful for newsletters specifically, again, because you produce them so frequently. So I definitely recommend, once you have a setup for your newsletter that you're happy with, to save it as a doc template, and even save individual blocks that you use or reuse frequently as templates as well, and categorize them as well, just to ensure that it's easy for you to know which blocks or which templates you can use to build out your newsletter. And then every next edition, always start it from that template. And then if you run into any things like, this doesn't really work, be sure to change it in the template itself so that the next time you create your next edition, you don't run into that issue anymore. That's why templates are very powerful for scaling creation. Also, be sure to organize your media. So we have a media library built into the system. But it's definitely advised to ensure that you keep it relatively organized. So with like good folder naming, good structures and stuff like that. And also we have shared folders, which is basically a bit more of centralized place in your media library where you can add all of your main brand assets. So logos or like stock photography that you often use, ensure that you add them there. So it's easy for you to find them and add them into your newsletter as you're creating your next editions. And then finally, also review mode, also something that we introduced a few months ago. It really allows you to basically get feedback from your coworkers with comments. So they can view the Foleon doc as you're building it, and they can leave comments where they think, okay, maybe change the color here, change the text here, make the button different. Makes it a lot easier for you to gather content or gather feedback from your coworkers and also implement that as you go.
These are such great suggestions, Dennis, and to maybe just link it to like the busy days of the audience right now. I think these are just tips so that if you have like all these different content projects going on, that you can just make the newsletter as easy for yourself as possible, especially as it's recurring. Yeah,
definitely agree. Thank you.
Great. We do have lots of questions come in, so thank you all for asking them. Let's just move on with the next part of your story, Dennis, and then we'll answer all of them after that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so we have one more topic, which is optimize, and I think after that we have time for questions. So we'll be sure to address your questions then.
Cool. Let's go to optimize.
Yep. Yeah. So optimize. Basically, some tips for better understanding how your newsletter is performing and also finding ways to improve it moving forward. So I think obviously because you'll mostly be sharing your your Foleon newsletter through email. I think it's important for you to set up some KPIs, so some key performance indicators. So what are things that you'll be looking at to see if your email and in extension the Foleon newsletter are performing as you want them to. So one thing you should be looking at is open rate. So what percentage of people that receive your email are actually opening it? And this is heavily influenced by your subject line. If you have a really good subject line, it will probably lead to a better open rate as well. But here, I always tend to strive for at least 30 to 35% open rate. And then CTR, which is basically click-through rate. So how many people of the ones that opened your email click through to one of the links, basically, or click through to the button that opens your email newsletter. I think here you should aim for at least 5%. And if you get anywhere to 10 or maybe even higher, I think that's very healthy. So those are things that I think you should be looking at and trying to see how you perform as you start sending out your newsletter more often. And then KPIs for the Foleon doc itself. I think depending on how big your newsletter is, or how many pages it has, I definitely recommend aiming to ensure that people read at least 60 to 65%. So if you have 10 pages, that would mean that they would need to view at least 6 or 7 pages based on this criteria. And similarly, how long do they spend reading your Foleon doc newsletter? I would aim anywhere above 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes as a KPI. And I think what's most important here is that we also have a benchmark report. It is based on data from 2021, so it's a bit older, but it is something that's still pretty valuable. So I have it linked here, and as said earlier, you can just access this link when we send you the slides. But that gives you an overview of how different Foleon docs tend to perform, and then you can benchmark against those metrics for your own case. And what I always do is that I log and track all of these KPIs in a spreadsheet to sort of like track the performance over time. So I've just set up reminders in my calendar, and so every time I send a newsletter, an email newsletter, or anything, like a week after, I have a reminder in my calendar to see how it performed and capture all of that in a spreadsheet, so I can also see how it performed as opposed to previous editions. And then some more tips for understanding performance. If you're looking at your Foleon doc specifically, like the pages, I definitely recommend looking at where people tend to bounce or exit. So bounce basically means somebody enters your Foleon doc and leaves on that page without doing anything. So that probably means that the experience in the Foleon doc is not what they expected based on where they were coming from. And an exit is just somebody that viewed multiple pages and then leaves on a specific page. If you see the bounce rate is very high somewhere, or the exit rate is very high somewhere, you probably have some work to do in optimizing those pages. And I would also recommend here to compare editions. So if you have like a fixed format or a fixed editorial formula, fixed topics, just look and see over different editions if some topics are resonating. So if the time on page is very high for a specific topic, always basically, it's probably wise to focus on that topic a little bit more. Whereas other topics that are maybe not resonating as well or are not being read as well as you hope to, definitely try and see if you can improve them moving forward, or even consider just dropping them completely based on performance. I always also recommend building in ways for people to share feedback. So this could be something simple, just adding a form at the end. Hey, what did you think of the newsletter? You can even add in a rating, stuff like that, and allow them to leave feedback. Or simply just add in some buttons where they can click. So click a thumbs up or a thumbs down if they like or dislike the newsletter. Because this way you'll have both quantitative data from the analytics, both on the email and the Foleon doc, together with the qualitative feedback that will really give you a complete picture to see how your newsletter is performing and where you can potentially improve it moving forward. And then some final thoughts from my end before we go into the questions. So obviously, you should make it very easy for people to subscribe to your newsletter, and you should ensure that they understand what they're signing up for. So what is the topic of your newsletter? How frequently will it be delivered? How can they recognize it? These are all things that you can mention upfront to ensure that they recognize it when they do receive it. And also, I recommend removing unnecessary hurdles for unsubscribing, so make that very easy. And of course, we have lots of examples. I think this was also asked in the chat already. We have lots of examples on our site. So you can definitely check those out after the webinar. We even categorize those by content type. Newsletter is one of those. So you can see a bunch of newsletters created by other Foleon customers to get inspired.
Yeah, that's great. I did see Asha already shared that URL in the chat as well. So
yeah, great.
Easy access. This was a lot of information, Dennis, very interesting and very useful. Maybe just to summarize it based on what I heard you say is, A, make it as easy as possible for yourself by setting up your system, no matter whether you create it in Foleon or just an email, to kind of get your newsletters with new content out the door quickly. And have a routine for yourself to look at the metrics, whether it's quantitative or qualitative data, to be able to improve every time. Does that more or less summarize it?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
That's fantastic. Very insightful. Maybe just if you could, from your experience as a customer marketer, what would be your kind of like the number one lesson that you'd be like, oh yeah, that was a game changer for me in my newsletter creation?
I think for us, it was definitely setting up a good process and setting up a good process to ensure that we're efficient with creating newsletters, but also ensuring that it's like recognizable. So really sticking to a certain formula, and then really sticking to it as long as it works, basically. But basically, just ensuring that it's recognizable and easy to create. Definitely, I think, very valuable for us so far.
That's great. Yeah, actually, our people team just started producing internal newsletters. So for kind of like everyone that works at Foleon, and I think Jonna is the person creating it, who's not a content creator. She's on the HR team. It gave her kind of like a peace of mind. Okay, so this is the formula. You have flexibility to change, but she just shares, this is what we want in it, send me your info and I'll put it in there. Yeah, it seemed to make it easier for her.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to put a question on the screen. It's a question from Eleanor. She says, will you be showing an example of newsletter that have been produced in Foleon? Do you not find that the engagement with the individual articles in the newsletter are reduced as people are having to click to get the Foleon doc open before getting to each article?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we don't have any examples lined up in this webinar, but we do have plenty on the website, or we can also share them with you personally if you prefer. So if you have a customer success manager, definitely reach out and ask if they can share any examples that are not listed on the site currently. But in terms of the engagement, yeah, that's a valid concern. I think depending on your newsletter and the topic, you can also consider adding links to specific pages within the email. So instead of just having one button, say, that says open a newsletter, you could already have sort of like deep links that link to a specific page within your newsletter. So if somebody, let's say for us, we would have a newsletter where we have product updates, customer stories, and all of that, basically. We could have just one button that goes to the cover page, but then also have some links, some deep links that go immediately to the product updates or immediately to customer stories, depending on what the person is most interested in. That's definitely still a possibility. But then when they land on that page, they can still go back and forth to stay within the newsletter itself.
Yeah, so the newsletter becomes a little bit more free format rather than you need to read every single page. You can leverage all the more interactive media elements that you cannot leverage in an email, and you get page insights based on how deep they read, how long they read, like that, correct?
Yep.
Okay. But still, Eleanor, it may be something to test and see what way is best to promote it to get the engagement where you'd like it. We have another question. Sean, do you have to have a Foleon account to use workspaces?
The answer is yes. So we can keep that relatively short. Yeah, no, definitely. Like if you have a Foleon account, a paid Foleon account, you can then split it up into several workspaces. But indeed, a Foleon account or being able to log into, if that's a question, so if you need to be able to log into Foleon, that's also the case. So you need to be a user. But so if like a Foleon admin in your company could set up workspaces, let's say you're in the marketing department or whatever, and you want to be added to your marketing workspace, you can just request that from your Foleon admin within your company.
Cool, thanks. Next question is from George. Does Foleon provide functionality for on-demand nurturing in terms of content pieces? For example, if someone opens a particular article hosted on Foleon in their newsletter, can it trigger a new email containing selected content pieces also hosted on Foleon?
Great question. Very interesting as well. I think it's not something that we Foleon ourselves offer, but we do have integration set up with several MarTech platforms, like HubSpot, Salesforce Pardot, Marketo, stuff like that. And what that integration does, it allows you to track which pages people are viewing in your Foleon doc. So for instance, and that would allow you to trigger automation, basically. So let's say I have a newsletter built in Foleon and I have it connected to HubSpot, and a certain person reads a page on our page on customer stories, for instance. In Foleon, I would see that that person has read that page or viewed that page. And then I could trigger automation on top of that to send them another email with additional customer stories or anything that they like, basically determined based on their engagement with the Foleon doc. So it's not something that we offer ourselves, but it is something that we offer through third-party integrations with MarTech systems.
Yeah, that's great. So that's something you want to probably look into, George, to leverage that capability.
Yep.
Sophia asks the next question. If you add a UTM code so you can track the links within your Foleon that people are clicking on, would this also identify any broken links? Sorry for my...
No worries. No worries. I think no, the answer here is no. The goal of UTMs is really to, within Google Analytics, you would be able to see where people came from. So in the UTM, you would add like source is Foleon doc, for instance. And then in Google Analytics, you could see, okay, how many people came in through the source being Foleon doc. But if you're having trouble keeping track of if you have broken pages on your site, for instance, or if you're linking to URLs that are no longer working, there are also other tools for that. That's not something that Foleon specifically can help out with, but you have other tools like Hrefs or that can definitely help out with getting that visible for you.
Yep. Good question, Sophia. Next question was asked by an account named Digital Design. If I have more than one brand, how to handle with one brand kit?
Good question. I think for starters, we'll start with just the ability to create one brand kit. So that's the plan right now. But in the future, we'll likely, but I can't make any guarantees, of course, we'll likely sort of increase it to also allow you to create more brand kits. Well, maybe interesting for you, it's also later in this webinar, we have another product webinar coming soon on March 16th. Where we will be covering specifically brand kit and a bunch of other features that are coming soon. So I would definitely recommend signing up for that one as well. But we'll post the link to that later in the chat for you.
Yeah, but that's a good question, and it's a very new feature, so more info will follow, and further developments are still to be decided. In order to fix that issue right now, though, you can save different docs with branding per brand that you manage as doc templates so that you can use it like that. And then it's probably smart to work for each brand in a separate project folder.
Yep,
all right.
Good addition.
Tessa has a question. Do reviewers have to be a user within Foleon, or can anyone review a document?
Good question. Yeah, they need to be a user, but we did implement, or we did add a different user types specifically for reviewers. So within Foleon, you have several user roles like admin, publisher, editor, and whatnot. And we introduced a new reviewer role for that specifically. And that will also be counted separately from your regular number of seats that you're allowed to have. So if this is something that you're interested in, I definitely recommend chatting with your customer success manager to see what the possibilities could be for you specifically, and also how the number of reviewers would work for your company.
Yeah, that's cool. So hopefully that answers your question, Tessa. The last one on my list right now is from George. Tricky one, for me would be at least. Hopefully you know this, Dennis. How does Foleon deal with the new Apple's mail privacy protection in terms of open rate?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think there's definitely been some shifts there for Apple specifically. So for those of you that don't know, Apple has made it a bit more difficult for marketers to see if people are opening their emails in Apple Mail, basically. And this doesn't have any effect on Foleon itself, because we don't have anything to send emails with Foleon. You would typically send those with other systems such as MailChimp or HubSpot or whatever you use. So for that aspect, for when you're sending the email, which you don't do with Foleon, but there can definitely be an impact there, because maybe your open rates will be lower because some opens will not be registered if they're happening through Apple Mail. But that doesn't affect Foleon specifically, but would rather affect the system that you're using to send your emails with.
Cool. We're going to move on. I've just opened another poll. So please let us know, when will you publish your next newsletter? Within a week, within a month, sometime later, or no plans for publishing at the moment? And while you click what answer is relevant for you, quick recap. We've talked about editorial best practices. So think about your audience, have a recurring time which you send your newsletter at, whichever your audience prefers, how to make them engaging. And that lesson will be able, you will be able to review it at a later stage as well. And Dennis has shared a ton of very valuable best practices around making your docs more engaging, making your newsletter scalable, and how to optimize continuously. So I hope this was very, very valuable for you. Let us know if there is anything you have not seen. Maybe there was something you hope to get out of it. We are out of time right now, but we will follow up with all the questions and open comments at the end. So let us know right now if there is anything that maybe you didn't get. There is the opportunity there. And then if you are curious what a Foleon newsletter made in Foleon looks like, this is one that the team creates. I think it goes out every month, right? Yeah, monthly tips. It's called The Crave. And Dennis, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. This one is for anyone working in marketing.
Yeah, that's correct. Anybody that's interested in just stories about content marketing, or marketing in general, definitely recommend signing up for that one.
Great. I believe Afsha will share the link in the chat. And then Dennis already mentioned it. We will have on March 16th our next quarterly product update webinar. It's going to be a big one, as there are some amazing product changes going on, which we will be sharing. If you've attended them before, you know they're always packed with valuable value. We'll have multiple speakers, plenty of time to ask your questions, and that is definitely a webinar we organize for our customers to make them get more out of the results, like out of the Foleon docs they create. So it's all for you. And then there is a lesson, linear read navigation options, as navigation is an important thing to take into account. We'll link that in the email afterwards. For now, I just want to, Dennis, thank you for being here, for answering all the questions, and for sharing so much of your wisdom that you have gathered over the years creating newsletters and working for Foleon.
No problem. I enjoyed it, and I hope I made sense. And I hope that people got something out of it that they'll be using in their next day-to-day.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for responding to the polls, for asking your questions, for making the time today. Please fill out the survey at the end of this webinar. You'll be immediately redirected as soon as we close this webinar, so in a moment. And let us know what was your takeaway? What tips do you have for us to make these sessions more valuable? And soon we will let you know about the next one coming up. For now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating. And all the best. Good luck with your next